Any questions from the audience?
Thank you. Question for, I think, Kaylee, right? Okay. I'm sorry, my memory. What sort of insights do you hope to gain from the classification of cloud types? Is there a particular sort of phenomenon in climate change that you're hoping to study, or what exactly is like the context?
Yeah, I mean, the context, I bring it back to like the big picture motivation that we have is understanding clouds better. And I didn't really get into it, but the processes that govern kind of cloud formation and precipitation are not well known. So just gaining a better understanding of that is really important. And also, I would also point to the fact that climate models do not model precipitation very well, which, as you can imagine, has lots of implications for crop yields, flooding, those sorts of things. So yeah, just taking baby steps in that direction, that's a very big picture. But hopefully this classification scheme will help us walk towards that. Yeah.
Thank you. Great talk too.
Quick question for Bistra. So how far are the federal policies that are implemented from being optimal compared to the optimal policies that your system does? And also, how do you convince government actors and partners to implement, this change depending on how far from optimal they are?
So you don't ask those questions because
That's why I asked.
yes. So I mean, I think part of this is to also advocate for data-driven decision making, where you really put all your best science and all your best data together to inform decisions, and it's done to some extent, but not explicitly through optimization. And so that's number one. And then the second part about the method that we developed, let's say, that incorporates institutional hierarchies, being realistic, I believe that the policy, the real policy impact of that would not be somebody just taking the model and using it, but for example, understanding the trade-offs from the data and the solutions we get, and then maybe more proactively incorporating reasoning about state priorities and how might they be misaligned and unanticipated, difference between federal and state priorities in order to do this indirectly. I don't expect them to actually adopt an optimization tool directly, but use it as a decision support to inform policy and how they discuss these topics and how they make decisions. Yeah.
I have a quick question for Kaylee. So in the classification result, like the fish type of cloud seemed like the hardest to distinguish. Why? Do you have any insights on why that is?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think this kind of gets at the difference between our ability to hand label things as maybe experts in the field versus what a neural network can learn, especially a convolutional neural network, and thinking about the differences between what we see those, and I don't know if you remember or if you notice, the fish structure is a little bit skeletal. It looks almost like a fish bone. And it's very easy for us to pick that out, but maybe it's not as easy for a neural network to learn, especially because the sugar and the gravel classes also kind of had that like sparse kind of sprinkling of clouds. Again, I'm using very technical terms here. But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay.
I had a general question for everyone. Besides saving the world, climate science, I feel like for an outsider's perspective, is very exciting because it's an example of interdisciplinary collaboration that seems to be unlike anything that I've experienced, at least in science. I mean, we have educators, we have policymakers, we have scientists from all different disciplines all across the world gathering data, game makers, technologists. What has your general experiences been compared to other areas of science in terms of this collaboration? Has it been like, are there general reflections that you've had as an experience of working in this field?
Well, as somebody who's done a lot of interdisciplinary work, basically the general impressions is it only can be done as a village, not as individual verticals. Like moving the needle on climate science and generally on sustainability is reliant on all of this expertise converging together and having some real partnerships and real conversations. And that's something that as academic community, we also have to work on. And that's why the projects that Mark talked about is very important, is how do we train the young scientists and students to talk across disciplines, right? So that's not nearly enough emphasized. And that's something that my students and myself had to learn on the fly, but it was the make it or break it of whether these collaborations were gonna fly, right? So learning how to explain complex concepts, how to listen to people from other disciplines like ecologists or climate scientists, how to ask questions in a way that they can understand where you're stuck in your understanding, and so on. So I think the biggest meta lesson is like we need more team science, more interdisciplinary work, and more interdisciplinary training about how to do this kind of thing.
All right. So on this note, this closes our session on AI for conservation and sustainability.